Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Kathy Baker, and I'm here for a parent-to-parent talk. I began a series last week, and it is all about parenting and how to teach your children what their job description is and to learn your job description. So last year I introduced that your children's job is to honor and obey you, and your responsibility is to instruct and discipline them in the way of the Lord. So if you missed that, I encourage you to go back and look at that first lesson in the series. And over the next 3 weeks, I'm going to be teaching about how to do that. And we're going to be looking at 4 words that begin with the letter C. Today, we're going to be looking at the conscience. Then we're going to look at correction, and then consequence, and I'm going to connect that with finding your child's currency. So that's what we'll do over the next 3 weeks. Let's look this week at the conscience and how to help your child develop a conscience. We are responsible for the faith development of our children. That's our God-given responsibility. Sometimes we want to hand that off to the church, or maybe if you're in a Christian school, we just want to let them do it. But it's the parents' job to train our children in the way of the faith. Well, that means it's our job to help them to develop a moral conscience, a moral compass, so that they can know right from wrong. Now, the purpose of the conscience is to reveal to every person that God exists and that there is right and wrong. So that's the kind of conscience we're looking at helping our children to develop. See, God gave us a conscience to provide us this internal motivation to find God and to give our heart to Him. So that's why it's so important for us to help our children to know what God wants us to do through our conscience. So parents want to learn to parent in a way that develops the conscience. Now, here is what it will do for your children. Number 1, so if you're taking notes, this would be, I'm going to give you 3 things that are really important for what developing a conscience is going to do for your children. First of all, it helps them to know that there is a right or wrong. Number 2, it will teach them to choose well. That means they will learn to take a stand for what's right and to deal wisely with the things that are wrong. The conscience is going to help your children to know about temptation and how to deal with it. Number 3, the conscience is going to motivate your child to think of others, not just themselves. So those 3 things: to teach them right and wrong, to help them to choose well, and to help them to think about others. Well, now this conscience developing is hard work, and it's ongoing. We as adults are constantly looking at our conscience, and we're evaluating ourselves against God's principles and how we're living. So what often happens is parents become the conscience for their kids. So here's what I mean by that. Think about your parenting and see if you are doing these things. Are you constantly telling your children how to think and how to feel and how to do, but never allowing them to make decisions on those, and then you can guide them and give them a correction path? For example, you might always just do something as simple as always telling them what time it is, instead of letting them figure out time for themselves. Because time is important in getting jobs done and getting tasks done and getting places on time. Are you always the one who is making sure they have their homework in their backpacks? Are you always one to point out to them when they are being wrong or dishonest or mean-spirited? Or are you allowing that moment of questioning where you're probing and asking them questions about what their actions are and whether or not they are right or wrong. You see, that's the difference. Instead of just pointing it out and shouting it out and telling them what to do and how to think, we lead them and guide them to do this for themselves. We want to help our kids to learn to think on the conscience level for themselves. And one way to do that is to train them in asking themselves questions. See, it's good sometimes to talk to yourself. And that's one way to do that, is to ask questions. We need to be doing the same thing. We need to be asking ourselves, was that a really nice way to talk to that person? Or, I'm really having some terrible thoughts, some mean-spirited thoughts. Is that really what I need to be doing right now? That's a good way to connect with our conscience. So here are some things that you can teach your child to ask. Am I doing the right thing? That simple question. Am I doing the right thing? Should I be helping others? Teach your child to evaluate certain situations by thinking in that context. Am I staying on schedule? Have them periodically check themselves on that. If you've allotted 30 minutes to get a job done, have them figure out a time to take a break and ask the question, am I on schedule? Am I doing the things that I need to be doing? Because that helps them to know the right thing to do is to stay on schedule because mom has asked me to do that or dad has asked me to do that. And if I'm going to be obedient and honor them, then I need to make sure I am doing what they asked. You see, that's the whole process behind this. One of the best strategies that you can use to foster conscience development has to do with these 3 strategies I'm going to give you when you are talking to your children. Because what you say and how you say it impacts your child's conscience, your child's heart. So keep in mind these ways to help your child develop a conscience. So I'm going to give you another set of 3. First of all, the tone of your voice makes a strong statement. So as you are teaching your children to be obedient and to honor you and to develop a conscience, the tone you use is really important. Number 2, your word choice is really important. So choose them carefully when you are giving instructions. If you give multiple warnings and multiple instructions requiring immediate action, children are going to learn to put up with those promptings and delay their action until it's actually required of them. Do you see what I mean? So your word choice is really important when you're asking them to do something. That it needs to be very simple. It needs to be direct. It needs to be firm instead of shouting out a series of things. Because if you're shouting out a bunch of things and a series of things for them to do and it needs to be done now, somehow that gets completely lost and then they delay acting on it for a long time until you come running after them and yelling at them. And that does nothing for developing a conscience. You see, they're just waiting for you to act and then they know that's their cue. So they usually know your emotional cue for behavior. They usually know when you have hit the boiling point, when you are angry, when your child is now on your last nerve, when you are motivated for them to act. They know. They know. So get careful with your word choice. Number 3 is your action point. Tighten your action point. That's when you stop talking and start acting. They need to know that that's going to be really tight. Your action indicates that your words are important. So how do your children know that you mean business? Unfortunately, it's when you're coming at them with all the force of energy that you have. And we want them to know by your words. We want them to know by your words that you mean business and that you tell them something to do and that you tighten the action point for it to happen. Now, I've given you in previous lessons a lot of information on how to give instructions. If you've missed those, I encourage you to go back and watch those on how to give instructions. But Two indications that your action point needs to be tightened is if you're guilty of doing these two things, getting angry or nagging. If you're getting angry and nagging, then your action point has not been tightened. Usually, our emotional cues tell the child we mean business. Now, here is a way that you can give your instruction. You say the child's name, then you say you need to, and then add the word now. So, Johnny, you need to put up your toys now. Those three things. That works for every age group. Those three things. Say the child's name, what they need to do, and put the word now. Those are word cues that you need to use. So, Sammy, you need to get your shoes on now. Sammy might not move, so talk is not working for Sammy because he hasn't caught on in that conversation that you've had with Sammy that when you say something, he needs to do it, he needs to obey you right then, the first time. So action is required then. So you train Sammy by you're having to go take action immediately when he doesn't respond. And this is repetitive action. Every time you say, you go to Sammy and you have action that goes with it, whether it means you're helping him do it, you're watching him doing it, you're waiting for him to return. So those three things then, so let's go back and look. Your tone of voice, your word choice, and your action point will help your child develop a conscience of his own and not you being the child's conscience. So let's probe how the conscious approach works to teach kids responsibility. One of the signs of responsibility is to complete assignments without the need for nagging or reminding. So if you are constantly reminding and nagging and you and the child is not responding, then you know that you are not helping develop the child's conscience. Sometimes what we do is we threaten, we're going to take your toys away, you're going to lose your privileges. If you don't do this, then you will not get to talk on your phone for a week or a month or a year or never, and I'm going to throw your phone away. And we tend to go those routes. And so if we need to take a step back in order to apply these principles that I've shared with you, then you might need to clarify with your child that the change is coming. And so you might need to take Sammy or whatever the child's name is, and you say, I've noticed when I've given you instruction that you don't obey me right away, and so you're not moving when I've asked you to do something. So we're going to make some changes. I'm not going to get angry anymore. I'm not going to beg you to do things. Instead, I'm going to give you a 5-minute warning, and then I'm going to say, it's time to go. You need to get up and go right now. And then you have to follow through. So you take a step back. You tell the child the new plan, the new approach, because this is part of coaching our children to behave well. This is helping to develop the conscious. And then you give the response. And when you ask Sammy to move and Sammy doesn't, you go to him, you get close, you look into those darling big blue eyes, and you have that conversation. You're not obeying. And what did we say is the consequence of that? And then you he needs to tell you whatever it is that you have shared with him is going to be the consequence. Well, words didn't work. Now we've had to go into action. So now you're going to lose the privilege of. So the close distance is going to raise the value, and it's going to make Sammy feel uncomfortable. So I want you to note this. This is an important thing. Discomfort is one of the ways a conscience works, and it's okay. Discomfort. I'm not using the word shame and the word guilt. I'm using the word discomfort is one way to help know that the conscience is working when we feel uncomfortable about something that we're doing that we know we're not supposed to do. So the continual practice of associating an instruction with an uncomfortable feeling helps develop the conscience. And then teach Sammy to begin to think about himself, his steps, and to begin to ask himself certain questions. You may have to practice that with him. If you're giving him 5 minutes to do something, and then you want to maybe in the middle of that say, Sammy, have you asked yourself the question? Am I on task? Am I doing what I'm supposed to do? So a quick review. We're focusing on teaching our children to honor and obey by looking at 4 C's. The first one is the conscience. And developing a conscience will teach your child right and wrong, to choose well, to think of others. Next, encourage your kids to do self-checks by asking themselves questions about their obedience. And then keep in mind your tone of voice, your word choice, and your action point. And it's okay to feel some discomfort when learning to develop a conscience. I hope this has helped. I look forward to seeing you next week, and we'll look at the second C, which is correction. Y'all have a good day.